basically in the first news article from May of 1971, where they felt like they had seen some sort of strange tracks, and I think they mentioned they could see at least 3 toes. And then following that, there was kind of the famous 3-toed track find in the soybean field.
Mm-hmm.
And the tracks are, if you see the photo of it, the casts don't look too great, but the photo you can see it looks, fairly well defined, and it's definitely something with 3 toes, maybe kind of another 4th digit like a dew claw, but
yeah.
They were, there's stories back and forth whether people thought those were real. And in subsequent years, there's been 4-toed tracks found, 5-toed tracks, and so it's hard to say. What do the animals all have 3 toes? Do none of them have 3 toes, or is it individual to individual, or were they even a hoax?
Mm-hmm.
It's just sort of an open-ended case, unfortunately, with some of those things. And the practicality of 3-toed tracks. I mean, the anatomy of a creature that stands at 6 or 7 feet tall, that is said to weigh between 300 and 500 pounds. It would be extremely difficult and to balance itself with 3 toes. I mean, no primate known has 3 toes, so it's kind of an odd characteristics or anatomy for a primate-like creature anyway. So that's one reason I have a problem with it. And I think most of the track experts kind of agree that if there are creatures with 3-toed tracks, it's an anomaly. It's not something that is necessarily an advantageous evolution or a way, development. So
definitely,
I don't know.
Yeah, I had heard. I think it was when we were in Falk, someone was saying maybe it was injured or something like that in the swamp or deformed, but
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a theory, is if the individual itself was an exception and it was injured, or obviously if these creatures exist, they're going to be in small populations, so you may have a situation of inbreeding, which inbreeding, the first thing it will affect is deformities of the hands and the feet. So, that tends to make some sense right there. So,
yeah,
for as much as somebody may say, well, it happened to be in this certain person's bean field and the tracks looked quite, very precise, each one, then on the other hand, 3 toes might not be out of the question for the small population. So you're kind of always kind of in that middle ground where there's no real proof either way. The case still remains open.
Definitely. Yeah, that's another thing that I think drives me to continue investigating and researching, is to see if I can get video proof or not proof. I guess video evidence would be the correct. And just see if we can. One of us out there, a lot of us are out there in the field trying to solve these cases and everything, and maybe one day we will. I wanted to.
Yeah, and I think at this point, in regard to that people, you see all kinds of fuzzy, blobby photos and pictures of sticks and this and that on the internet now, but the key here is that we're going to have to raise the bar. Nobody's going to accept this as proof unless it's a extremely good picture, and even that's probably not going to convince, but at least it'll sort of, present the possibility. So in my mind, you got to keep looking for that really, really good photo. You've really got to find the best you can find. Posting another blurry photo is not helping anything. So in some ways, while I may find stuff that looks interesting, I post few and far between just because I want to raise the bar of what, we're looking for here, and to try to, if there's going to be proof or even to get science interested, we've got to have a level of quality.
Definitely. Yeah, like even me, like I had thought I caught something on camera, and then it was bad quality because it was kind of off in the distance, and I still I'm not sure if it was something or if it was like just the way like a leaf on the camera. So it's just like I'm just trying to get the best quality that I can when I go out there. So I try to film as much as I can when I'm out there too.
Well, that's good. I mean, that puts you in a better possibility of catching something because it's, the reality of it is, a lot of people are like, well, everybody's got a cell phone. How come we can't get a picture of Bigfoot? I'm like, well, if you even encounter one of these creatures, you've got seconds at best, typically, to pull out your phone, get the app open or whatever you're doing. Even if you got a manual camera, you better be fast. So
yeah,
it's not as easy as it seems. As there's cameras and all that. It's like most witnesses and the credible sightings that I've investigated. Most times people have just a very few seconds in which they can see the creature, and between the time it's just in the trees and gone.
Yep. Yeah, I actually one of the people I interviewed about their Alabama white thing sighting, when they saw it, they actually had their phone out, and they didn't even, like, they were so scared because whatever it was, like, frightened them, they didn't even think to snap a picture or anything like that. And then their dog started pulling away from it. And have you heard that too in cases about how dogs, if dogs are around, they'll kind of be afraid to go near it or pull away from it?
Oh yeah. There's quite a few of those kind of sightings. Coon hunters and people who are out walking dogs that, the animal's going to react, even ahead of time before you may even lay eyes on it. The animal can sense that, and the dogs will cower or run or start barking, and then as soon as they see the thing, it's, then it's turn tail and run. So yeah, definitely, I'd say, man, there's a lot of accounts that have to do with dogs and interaction between Bigfoot sightings and dogs of some nature or another.
That's very interesting. I saw that you've been to the Honey Island Swamp. I've heard a little bit about the Honey Island Swamp Monster. What's the story behind that one? Do you know much about that one?
Yeah, quite a lot. That case first became widely known to the public in around 1974 when it was featured on a show called In Search Of, which was kind of a, the monster quest of its time or something. And basically, Honey Island is located about an hour east of New Orleans in a obviously very swampy and very forested area out there in the Pearl River Wildlife Management. And it has a long history of sightings of a creature that is somewhat reminiscent of Bigfoot. I mean, it's described as being tall and hairy, can walk upright on two legs, but it's often also described as being a little thinner. Its legs may be thinner, and it's known to swim and navigate in the waters, which is kind of not very ape-like. And the first sighting, the first famous one, came from Harlan Ford and a hunting partner who said they were out there in 1963 and were heading to one of their hunting camps and came up on this animal. They could see its back, and at first they thought it might have been a wild hog or something, but then it stood up and turned around, and at that point they obviously saw that it was a very bizarre creature, and then it turned and ran.
Wow. And
ever since then, there's been a history of sightings. I've interviewed a number of people myself, and have of course been there, and it's one I cover in my Beyond Boggy Creek a little bit, but since it's not quite Bigfootish, I'm actually going to be featuring it in another book I'm working on right now, so that I have more of the full story of the Honey Island Swamp Monster.
Nice. That's awesome. I also saw that you had went up to Maine Wildlife Park in Portland, Maine. What is there a cryptid up there in that area?
Well, that trip, I visited Lorne Coleman's International Cryptozoology Museum, which is there in Portland, Maine. Highly recommended to check that out if you're into this stuff. And of course, Portland, Maine is a nice little seaside town. Great place to vacation. So, I went there, and then there's the wildlife refuge or reserve out nearby in the woods there. And then, in general in Maine, there are a number of Bigfoot sightings. And when you get out there in the woods, you can very much see how that's possible because it's very heavily wooded up in there. And
Maine is wild.
I'd say that's probably the Bigfoot would be the cryptid of Maine, unless you want to talk about the waters, and then you're talking about the Atlantic coast where you've got sightings of various sea serpent-like creatures up and down that area.
Yeah. Actually, the times I've been to Maine was the time I thru hiked the Appalachian Trail. Of course, I went through from Mount Katahdin south through that, and I could definitely. It's. Some of the locals would tell us, just about if someone was to disappear into the woods, you might not see them again. And it's just a very vast wilderness. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Hiking the Appalachian Trail is no minor feat. That's some rugged stuff, and make you appreciate nature. I've done a lot of hiking. I've never done the Appalachian Trail. I don't know if my feet would make it, but I did get a report, which I covered in Beyond Boggy Creek, of a guy who was going to hike the trail. He was going to do the entire thing. He's from California, and he flew out to Georgia to start. I think Springer Mountain, I think is the name of the area where literally the foothill, the start of the trail is, and he was up there he barely got onto the trail, was hiking the first day, and had a really bizarre and scary Sasquatch encounter.
Wow.
So had to sleep overnight out there, in which, as far as he could tell, these things were kind of circling around his tent. And then the next morning, hiked to the nearest, hiking post or whatever, found somebody to take him back, and he just said, "That's it, I'm not hiking," and he trucked it back to California. So
there was when I did the trail, I went from Maine south to Georgia. So we started in Maine around June 5th and ended in Georgia November 15th. And I didn't really have any Bigfoot encounters that I know of. There was one night we were in our tent, and I think it was a bear, but something came and was walking around the tent, and you could feel the ground, vibrating, and it was grunting, but I'm pretty sure it was a bear, because we were, in territory where they had signs up saying that watch out for the bears, and to hang your food up and everything. But I'd love to do the trail again and kind of focus in on cryptid legends and haunted legends of the trail, because there's just so much. Have you heard about there's the man-eating rock on Glastonbury Mountain in Vermont, and the fur-bearing trout, and just some interesting stuff like that.
Right, yeah. And those are always cool things, whenever you're going to an area to kind of research a little bit about what may be around, whether it's a haunted location or a cryptid. It's always fun to kind of, even if you don't fully expect to see it, at least go to the place where, this is where they said they saw this or that. So I love that stuff. Yeah,
me too. I love getting to those locations, and even just going to Falk, and when I got to the Monster Mart, I just felt like a little kid. I was just so excited, and then once we met Denny and everything, and he kind of gave us a place to go drive around, and it was just awesome.
Yeah.
Have you had many encounters yourself, or any stories like that?
You know,